Hi, I'm Dave March, and welcome to Land of Confusion, the show, Ricochet show for members by members, where we interview members. And this is my co-host.
A member. I'm Don Tillman. I'm in Palo Alto, California, with a pretty nice day.
Yeah.
And who do we have here?
We have Aaron Miller.
Yay!
So,
and
I'm
he's been around Ricochet for a very long time.
Since the beginning, I think.
Yeah.
Just about.
I was just going to mention that in the past, I had a gimmick where I would ask people at the end of each episode who they want us to interview. I've kind of dropped that recently because I was having a hard time getting those people to come on. And then Don had the ideas like, why don't we just interview the people who keep like commenting on our threads and doing that? I'm like, you know what, let's go to our actual audience and interview them first. So yeah, anyone on the group, anyone like that. And we've got some great people coming up in future episodes, including Dr. Bastiat. So that'll be a couple weeks from now.
I actually probably would have recommended him. So
yeah. So
yeah, I figure those people are at least not repulsed by the whole idea. So yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah. So we started, the first one on that policy was e-hearing, and now we're talking to Aaron, and we've had, and Blue Yeti was in there, mixed in there for fun. So anyways, you're coming in from us from Texas.
Yep, from
whereabouts?
Spring, which is just outside of Houston on the north side.
Okay.
So I never tell people I'm from Houston because I don't like the city. It's a different world. So and this Spring used to be smaller and less urban than it is today, but I'm actually just down the road from Lowell Lovett.
Oh,
really?
Well, that's great. I'm just. Does he keep a tidy lawn? What? Tell us details. We want details.
Well, I don't know him. He does. He sings at the church across from mine every Christmas, but I never run into him. I know the road he's on, but I don't never run into him. He's the only person I think I've ever seen mention Spring in my area in an interview before. So we do have one other famous person, which is the Shelton from Big Bang Theory.
Oh, really?
Went to my school, so he went to the same high school as I did, but he's a little older than I am.
Interesting. I remember just right before things went crazy around here, me and my brother and sister went for dinner in up north here from a place called Guelph or Cambridge, where my sister lives. And we were just walking into this restaurant, and I didn't even see them. I was too busy yakking away. And then my sister turns to us as soon as we get inside. She's like, "Was that Justin Bieber that just walked by with his wife?" And then she goes to the wait staff, because they come out of the restaurant. It's like, "Was that Justin Bieber that walked by?" And they're like, "Yep, that was him." Like, okay. And of course, Cambridge is where he grew up.
I think Bieber in my mind is a perpetual adolescent, so I can't imagine him being married.
Yeah.
Well, what is it? I got, where were you born, and what was it like growing up there?
So I was born in Louisiana, but I did not. My family lived in Slidell for several years, but we moved when I was really young, so I really don't remember much about it. I stopped in Louisiana plenty of times passing through it, but I grew up in Spring, and here in my family has a lot of both my parents are from Mobile, Alabama, so I have a lot of family over there, and we spent a lot of time going back and forth when I was a kid. So it's kind of a mix between Spring and Mobile. Half of them have shifted to the other side of the bay now. They're over in Daphne.
I don't know where that is.
Daphne is just across Mobile Bay, just on the east side.
Okay.
It's as if you needed to get away from the big city of Mobile. It's not very big, but
Okay. Um, what is it? The next question usually. So
He's got his questions. He's got a list.
yeah, I do. I do try to go through it. So do you? I'm going to take you. Probably consider yourself a conservative, or not a libertarian or a classical liberal. Why did you become that, and when did you realize you weren't like all the other kids?
I've always been a conservative.
Mhm.
Never considered anything else.
Mhm.
So it's I guess it's pretty normal for my area. I was surprised one time when I think it was Yeti sent me an email one time asking, what is it about my area that apparently a lot of Ricochet traffic was coming from our
Huh.
North Houston.
Mhm.
So I don't know if that's still the case. I asked him recently. I told him it would be a neat conversation on Ricochet to have a map of the most traffic from different areas of the country, and then just ask the locals why that is. But here it's basically this is the oil capital of the world, and the oil companies have moved outside the city to get away from stupid Democrats. So I'm right here in the oil corridor. So you get more and more Democrats in this area, but this is the district of Ted Cruz and Dan Crenshaw. So it's
Oh, wow.
when everyone else is everyone complains about Republicans, and I worry about the party too, but there's nothing I can do about it since mine are doing okay. So
Okay. So
kind of the opposite of Don's situation, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Or
right.
mine.
I'm just surrounded. And I can't put like a bumper sticker or a yard sign out because bad things will happen.
Actually, EJ Hill had he made a fake bumper sticker one time for Ricochet during the Obama years, and it said forward, but it had sheep going off a cliff.
Uh-huh.
I showed
EJ's
that
so
to
clever.
I showed that to my uncle, and he asked me to make it to a bumper sticker, so I did. And he drove around Mobile with that.
By the way, if you want to make your own bumper sticker, it's really easy to. If you have an inkjet printer, you can buy self-adhesive vinyl for your inkjet from from Staples, whatever, and they sell self-adhesive vinyl. You can do anything you want.
Well, so far I think I have one Christian sticker on my car, and that's about it. I don't need I don't need it to be covered like the hippies. But
Literally, like that guy across the street from me. I am not kidding.
Like, it's weird. There are no political stickers ever around here.
Oh.
Like on cars,
Really?
almost nobody does like election things. No one's got a Trudeau bumper sticker. It's for both sides. It's just not a thing at least in my branch of Canada, to have bumper stickers telling people their affiliation.
Canadians are too polite, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Kind of like we're sort of polite until things it's like Patrick Swayze in Roadhouse. It's like we're nice until it's time not to be nice.
Till the fisticuffs.
Yeah. Yep. So how did you find out about Ricochet?
I followed Mark Stein. So I was reading, I think he had his Stein Online website that I was reading daily. And he mentioned that he was part of some podcast, mentioned these guys I'd never heard of, Peter Robinson, Rob Long. And even though I'd read National Review, the names did not ring a bell. And I followed him over, and then he was a regular on the podcast for I think a few months, and then he ditched ditching us?
I think it was longer than a few months, so I don't
Was it?
remember.
Mhm.
I think it might have been almost a year.
Well,
Oh,
I
well,
remember thinking it would be pretty neat to be able to have a conversation with Stein through the website. He never participated in the comments,
right,
and
right.
yet I stuck around. So it was
Mhm.
that's testament to Ricochet that I followed him there, and then when he left, I stayed. So
Yep. Yeah, Blue Yeti doesn't even know what happened, what the falling out with Stein is. Goldberg, Jonah has hinted he has his things, but I don't really pay attention to Jonah too much anymore because, look, I don't mind people who don't like Donald Trump. I just don't like being lectured for 20 minutes every episode about why you don't like Donald Trump.
Right.
It's just like, I heard it the first 100 times you said it. Can you move on? Can we talk to the couch again? The couch was fun.
well, that's one of the interesting things about Ricochet is you have so many people with so many different interests that it's never just the same thing every day.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it can get close when there's some big thing in the news and everyone wants their own take on it. But
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to guess that that's what you like most about. What do you like most about this platform we're all on?
I like the mix of people. There's a surprising amount of specialists on Ricochet, people who have intense knowledge of all sorts of things, and you never know what you're going to get. And plus, it's a place for real conversation. So even in a conservative area like mine, you don't always get really in-depth intellectual conversations that are polite and don't end up with some redneck just yelling about something. It's intelligent conversation.
Yep. So, what do you think about what's going on? So, what's your view on the pandemic?
I'm ready for them to end these stupid restrictions. I don't understand. I understand why Democrats would want to prolong the restrictions. I don't understand why Republicans have put up with it for so long, because that was one of the things that had me convinced that COVID was a big deal in the beginning, was the fact that everyone was treating it like a very serious issue. Most countries and in the US, it was Republicans and Democrats in all the states. So, but then those emergency powers did not remain, emergency powers are supposed to be fleeting. So I don't care how serious it is. At this point, legislators should have stepped in, and we should have returned to the normal process of government by now.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. And I think it's a lesson, kind of a universal lesson, that there are these incentives for people in power to go overboard, no matter who they are, no matter what situation.
Yeah.
In this country, of all places, we see lots of mayors, city councils, and governors all just go overboard on this. And the opportunity that where you have things are ill-defined, right? And you say, well, this do this to prevent the spread of disease, even though it may or may not do anything significant. You say, well, worst case, you wouldn't want anybody to die. So they just take advantage of that. And and it seems kind of universal.
Yeah, so I mean, Greg Abbott, our governor, has been pretty good up to this point, and all the Republicans are just as bad as the Democrats right
Just
now.
scratch my face. Hold on. Okay.
Yeah. Well,
That itches. Okay.
the best one still seems to be DeSantis in Florida. From what I can tell, talking to my friends in Florida, and some of them are Democrats, some of them are Republicans, and they're just saying, we're open. Everything is open. The only thing that we have to do is wear a mask.
Yeah.
Disney World is packed.
Good.
Well,
It was before COVID. Everything's open. You just have to wear a mask. And I'm like, that's all I have to do. I will wear a mask happily. But like,
Yeah.
the problem is that's not all we have to do in some places.
Yeah, my brother recently took his family to the beach just last week, I think, when Florida opened up the beaches. And why would a beach not be open? Why? I mean,
Right.
as much air circulation as you have there.
Every beach in
Right.
Ontario was open the moment they were allowed. They're like, okay,
Yeah.
first thing opening on stage one was the beaches.
No, you can't. No, it's not possible to have better air circulation than a beach.
Yeah, it was just like,
I mean,
so there's
it's not
like,
physically possible.
yeah.
There's a lot of ridiculous stuff going on. When this whole thing started, I was helping my brother-in-law with some exterior work, and at first he withheld his hand. He wasn't sure if he should shake hands. I said, "Man, I don't care. we gotta
Yeah.
live life." And from then on, he's a country boy, so he was fine and blowing all the stuff off. And at this point, I think there's more and more people who they're reaching the end of their patience.
Yeah.
And they're just going to stop caring what the government says.
Well, look at that big post on the main feed this week about Montana. No one's even wearing masks. He's like, no one's even wearing masks anymore. They just don't care. Walk into the store and just buy anything. Like, no one's going to enforce it.
So around here, I think it's kind of a mix where you get people who are very concerned about it and wearing masks. Then you get the people who are wearing masks just to avoid a row. And then you get people who are not people who are looking for a row generally, just people who don't care and they're just not going to put up with it. But you understand when you're going into a restaurant or a business and that business owner doesn't have much of a choice and they're going to get fined if you don't wear a mask. So it's hard in situations like that. But
yeah, for me, I've always respected the property owner. It's like, you want me to put on a mask, I'll wear a mask. You want me to put on a striped pajamas costume, maybe I won't be doing that. I won't be doing that. But if that's kind of the requirement, maybe that's what I have to do. But like, you're the owner, I want your service.
Well,
so, Aaron, remind me, what is your profession? What do you do?
So I mostly help out the infirm and old people. I'll take people to doctor's appointments. I'll run errands for people, take care of stuff around the house, and sometimes I just need to sit with somebody who has dementia. It's much easier with mild dementia than it is with severe dementia. That's terrifying at times, but I do a mix of that and some outside work. I told David sometimes I'm helping my brother-in-law out in the field, and he's an electrician, and somehow people always reserve the digging ditches and working in attics for the middle of summer. So, just the way of the world. But so a mix of manual labor and kind of not labor at all, very simple stuff.
Now, how did you get into doing that kind of simple stuff?
Well, when I finished college, then my grandma was 92 at the time, and she took a fall getting on a ladder that she should not have been on, and fell, broke her hip, I think it was. And so my family offered they asked me to move in, and they would pay me to live there with her, take care of her. So I agreed to do that, and I did that for a few years until she passed, and got more jobs like it when I got back. So, and I still kind of, sometimes I'm in Alabama, sometimes I'm in Texas, and bouncing around. I went to school in San Antonio, so I've been there as well.
Mhm.
But mostly around the Spring area or Cypress, area, north side of Houston.
Mhm.
And you mentioned you were a musician.
Yeah, so that's what I thought I would be doing when I was a young adult. I was sure I would be a rock star, and did not get out there and perform nearly as much as I needed to. I've tried to get on the songwriting end as well, just writing jingles and whatnot, but play recreational for the most part. I've actually been meaning to ask you about those the myriad of guitars there.
Oh, those, yes.
So I'm
Okay.
guessing that I see
You want to go
at
through
least
them?
Yeah, that'd be
one
great.
Fender. Some of the others look like Epiphones.
No. Okay.
No, Rickenbackers. Where are they?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Rickenbacker guitars.
Mhm.
The first is a 12-string Roger McGuinn edition, special
Oh,
edition.
nice.
And one day, as an experiment, I just decided to, when I was changing strings, I did the obvious experiment. Hey, what does this thing sound like as a 6-string? And holy crap, sounds great. This is the best guitar I've ever played. So I got a second. And that one's wired up for 6 strings. This one's wired up for 12 strings.
Huh. Okay.
And that's my main, the 6-string Rick is my main guitar.
Okay.
Next to that is, it's an electric sitar.
Okay.
Yeah.
And next to that is Ovation Deacon, which is an unusual electric guitar they made. Next to that is a Rickenbacker bass. Lovely gift from my wife when we got married. And Stratocaster next to that. And that's a Guild Songbird, a small acoustic.
Those are nice.
That's it. And over here, anyway, there's just more over here. There's
Yeah.
more. I have a Guild F50 over here. It's a big, enormous acoustic 6-string.
Fascinating.
And your guitars?
Mine are all scattered around. They're not on the wall.
All right.
But I've got a couple Alvarez 6-strings, and then I've got a Spanish guitar. I've got a custom Carvin electric.
No,
which I like being it's a nice middle ground between something like a Stratocaster and something like an Ibanez, to where I can play a wide variety of music on it. And then I've got a 12-string. It's an Epiphone acoustic, and I've got a bass, an Ibanez bass. And, but they're all scattered around. I've got plenty of other crazy instruments. Like you can kind of see, I've got some weird instrument from India that's like it's got 1 string and a drum on the bottom, and I don't even remember the name of it. But
sorry, folks. We get like this.
No, it's okay. This is
we totally get like this.
I think it's great. I think it's great. I think people have been wondering about your guitar collection for a while, and now they get to know.
Yeah. I like the Ricks a lot. They're still handmade by family-owned company.
Mm-hmm.
Made them for, I don't know, a good part of a century, and the craftsmanship is just beautiful. And I sort of fell in love with them. So I like to play unusual instruments. I think people just play the same old things all the time. I like to explore the more offbeat models that have their own. I mean, each instrument has its little discoverables, its hidey holes, its quirks, and the things you can do on it.
Yep.
And I like that. So I tend to go for that. And I'm an unusual player anyway. I'm just my own weird style. So I don't try to be like anything else.
That's me as well. I ended up, I grew up with all the hair metal of the late 80s, early 90s. So Metallica and Alice in Chains and, Guns N' Roses, all those. And I was trying to do full band sound by myself on guitar. So ended up being, it's almost like if Dave Matthews tried to play Metallica, then you might get something.
No,
Wow.
yeah, but I mostly grew up with the Beatles. Got into progressive rock in a big way, and Gentle Giant, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Yes, Crimson, and such. And now, in my older days, I'm getting more into jazz, which is standard. And along the way, I just love Baroque music and folk music and 60s pop and
I think everybody
psychedelia.
You tend to drift towards mellower sounds as you get older.
Mm-hmm.
You want to relax a little bit more.
Well, also there's more subtlety. You appreciate the subtleties more, I think.
Yeah.
Growing up, there was a song that used to get played a lot, not so much now, but it's still there, called "I'm an Adult Now." And the one of the lyrics is like, "I don't like to play loud music anymore. Sure, I like to play it, but I don't like the racket."
Yeah. Well, it just nobody wants to see an old man being a headbanger,
Mm-hmm.
So I make metal songs too, and I still like it, but it's it's a little odd when you see Ozzy or someone still.
Yeah, or Rolling Stones. Like, oh my God. Jagger coming out in a wheelchair.
I get to say I like this sophisticated music, but at the same time, I have this love of 60s pop. And 60s pop is really kind of interesting because at the time, the limitations of the medium were very difficult. I mean, odds are your song was going to be heard on a little transistor radio on the beach. And that's not an optimal listening environment.
No.
So you have to get something musically interesting to be heard on that kind of medium. So that means you have to have like this killer hook, melodic hook or a chord change or something that gets people to notice. And that's tough.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is that bass playing in the early 60s, the electric bass had just been invented. And there were no cliches. Nobody knew, the cliches hadn't been developed yet. And so nobody knew what to do with the electric bass. Should it have a low sound? Should it be play it like guitar? Can I play chords on it? What do we do? And so nobody knew. And they were all trying all sorts of crazy crap. And it was great. It's kind of an adventure. Now people play in cliches a lot. And it's not as, oh, I'm going to do the slapping and popping, I thought the slapping and popping bass was like interesting for about one day, then after that, I lost it.
It takes some getting used to. I got familiar with Rickenbacker because my old bassist from my high school band, he loved Rickenbackers and he was a slap and pop bassist, and he got a great sound out of it. It was fun to play. I never actually saw. I don't think our store had Rickenbacker 6-strings.
No.
They didn't have normal guitars, so.
Yeah, they're rare. The company doesn't have the quantities of Gibson and Fender or the size, and they have an enormous backlog, so they could, but they don't.
Well, I think a lot of guitars are made there in California, so you probably see a greater variety there than we do here in Texas.
Well, it's kind of true. There is this, like the Central Coast of way south of me, but if you know the cities, like San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara, and down to Oxnard, that whole area there are about a dozen instrument manufacturers there. and that's like about a 2-hour drive or less than that down the coast. And yeah, there are a lot there. Off the top of my head, I think Ernie Ball, Music Man, DW Drums, Guild Guitars now. There's just
I
a
think
lot.
we used to get a brand called Seagull that I think came from California.
Maybe, yeah.
And they were pretty nice sounding.
Hmm.
But,
oh yeah, a whole bunch of acoustic instruments around there. Yeah,
yeah.
that's right. Santa Cruz guitars, right? Just a lot. There's a lot. And right now, the biggest acoustic guitar, maybe the biggest, is Taylor Guitars.
Okay.
And they're like San Diego, but those folks like ship hundreds of acoustic guitars a day. It's really quite an enormous operation.
Mm-hmm.
But we digress.
No,
Yeah,
I think it's great.
What are the other topics?
You guys want to go on another 15, 20 minutes. I mean, I'm not going to.
We still have half your viewers.
I mean,
I told
think
David I expect in the background he's got the nuclear football somewhere there. He's got the red button ready to push.
Yeah, well, we were talking about that before you came on, Don, about the nuclear football, and I was saying about how in Russia, for example, there are 3 nuclear footballs. They got the Minister of Defense, Putin, and the head of the army each have their own nuclear football strike capability. They're not like America or some of the other countries. I don't even know what the French and the British do with certainly I don't think anyone knows what Israel's doing. In Israel, does the president have the football? Does Ariel Sharon have the football? Is it like in the hands of like field army officers, whether or not to use the nuke?
So is this the 3 footballs? Is this in any of them or all of them?
What do you mean?
Operation. I mean, do
They're
they need
all
to get
operational.
all 3?
All the Russians.
Any one of them set it off.
Any one of them could go nuclear.
Well, that's
Yeah.
not good.
It's comforting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
That's
imagine
not good at all.
the third one probably goes to the highest bidder among the generals.
Yeah. Yep.
That's how they keep
It's just
pay Putin's bills.
Yeah, just it's interesting to see different cultures have not got so much. Don't think of it's not necessarily a big deal. I'm sure they think setting off a nuclear bomb is a big deal, but they just don't see having to be so centralized, controlled in the way that the United States, for example, things to think it should all be under the hands of the president. I hear Reagan hated the thing. He refused to learn it till like 6 years into his presidency, how the thing worked. Like my understanding is most presidents just like, okay, let's just do this thing within the first month of becoming president. Let's just do the drill and get it over with, kind of like going to the dentist. But Reagan really pushed it off, and all these people who think he was such a madman wanting to detonate and destroy the world is like, my understanding is that one of the reasons they did Star Wars is because they didn't want, he really, really wanted to avoid nuclear war. And sorry, I was going to say this was kind of an interesting situation. So I was listening to a group of professional war gamers, and the guy one guy was in charge of running a war gaming for like Rand Corporation and those guys on Star Wars. And they were like, so what they knew what they were running these war games, and they would be like, the Russians use so many nuclear weapons over the course of time. And they're like, what happens if we don't get 100% security? We'll never get that. But what happens if we run the scenario at 10% security, 20%? And they found by 50% security, the Russians would run out of nuclear bombs before the world was destroyed. Because a certain amount would get shot down, someone would be intercepted, all these things. They would have to use more to try and penetrate the defenses, and they were finding out. And they're like, we could develop weapons, and with the understanding that we got 50% protection. And then the Cold War ended, and they didn't need to do it.
All right.
Mm-hmm. So from that's Ricochet. on one hand, you're talking about guitars, and the next thing you're talking about nuclear weapons.
Yep, that's how we do it. That's how we do it. It's a good mix. It's a good
Yeah,
mix.
I mean,
So,
look at my.
so we have a debate tonight, actually, in
Ooh, yes,
just a few hours at this point, right? At the time we're recording this, the debate will be happening in like 2.5 hours, I think. 3.5, whatever. Won't matter. It'll be done by the time people see this. So I guess we should say very little about it because.
I mean, I think we should talk a little about it.
Okay.
You can make predictions, and then people can see if we're right or not.
Yeah, no one's going to see this before the debate, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. It'll be interesting. I mean, we've got two very different personalities here.
You know, it'll probably what will be most interesting about it is that I bet in the past year people have heard more from Kamala Harris than they have from Pence. I mean, from
Pence.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's you never see them. So all you see is Trump. So
well, that's the way Trump likes it.
Not that it matters, but but I was actually planning on skipping the debate. Did not find it very. I'll get the clip notes on Ricochet later. So.
Yeah, that's usually how I do it. But last debate, I was asked to become a panelist on a live stream, so that's why I had to put myself through it. Oh, we lost Don. Anyway, so yeah, so
I'm back. The phone went off. I don't know what that looked like on the Zoom. Sorry.
Just your name comes up, Don Tillman. Big black. You'll see it when you watch it later.
They automatically replace your face with Biden these days.
So yeah, I have no idea what this will be like because they're, we've seen in the previous Democratic debates that that Kamala Harris is just kind of is on the offense. She lunges.
Yeah. So Pence has that thing where when he was a congressman, I believe, where he did some anti-trans or I understand it was really blown up at the time, but I fully suspect Kamala will bring back all that stuff against him in an attack because that just seems to be the thing. She made Biden's busing thing into a thing. So I fully expect.
It's so
right?
terrible. Oh,
yep. And now she's like, "Oh, well, I just did that because I thought it would help me win." And really, is that?
Well, she kind of makes it up as she goes along, right? So.
Oh yeah.
It probably the best strategy against her was the same strategy that would have worked against Biden. Is you just be quiet and let her hang herself.
Yeah, I agree. Because trying to use logic and reasoning and arguing the points, which are just made up lies and such, doesn't get you anywhere. You just say, I think what Trump should have done really is just say, for anytime he gets the floor, he should have said, enough of that nonsense, and then goes into what he cares about.
Which is what Biden did a fair bit. I think Trump was just out of practice in his debate.
Yeah.
I think he got himself convinced that Biden was just going to be this old man who was just going to drift off to sleep halfway through and that he could just push him hard until he broke. And he did do a little breaking later, but it didn't really matter. I think one of Trump's strengths is the zinger. But he kept talking all the time. It's like you can't give a good zinger if you never let the other guy speak.
Right.
Well, he has the opportunity now. I'm not sure he realizes that, but it's a different world than it was 10, 20 years ago. These days, a much larger portion of voters spend time on the internet. They follow YouTube, they follow Facebook and Twitter, so he has an opportunity. If I was him, I would. Well, I guess you're limited in what clips you can take from the debate, but he could take certain select clips as much as the law will allow, and then make a new response that is a scripted response. Have charts and things like Paul Ryan used to do, and visuals for people to look at. Have work with Prager University, help you figure that out, and that it would make he could have some good campaign ads using that.
Oh yeah, there's definitely stuff. There's both sides are mining it for good ideas at this time, so I'm not worried about that. It's just like, I think the other thing Trump needed to do, and surprisingly for a guy who's spent so much time on TV, but I think, like I said, he's just out of practice and he didn't think he would have to work that hard. And I think the Biden campaign suckered us all in by spending that 1 week where he just kept shutting down his events after 10 a.m. I think that was a trap, that he was going and then doing debate practice, but letting everyone think he was just falling asleep. And then when we saw him that night, he was much more prepared and able to go at it. And I did take some comfort in the sense that at least if he does win, I'm not too sure about that, he won't be the weak old man we all thought he was going to be. I don't think he's going to be getting pushed around by Kamala like we all thought was likely to happen.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I would disagree with that. Yeah, I would disagree. Go, Aaron. Yeah.
I mean, I do I still worry, because it's possible they just gave him the right vitamins or whatever, and he was more alert that day. But I mean, I'm sure he's not senile constantly. There's no way he could have given that performance if he was that far along. Yeah. I don't know how he is on a regular basis. I still don't like the idea that he's not the one we're really voting for. I don't like the idea of a puppet president.
Yep. Well, we'll see what happens. That's one thing we can say from the tonight's debate. It will be the first time really a lot of people are going to have a chance to get a good, solid look at your senator there, Don.
My senator. Oh, yeah. Thanks for reminding me.
And see how she does on a one-on-one with a guy who's much more reserved, much more calm, and much more not going to be jarred by anything.
But I'm sorry.
Well,
I was going to say, I share
right.
your view about the puppet president a lot. And at the same time, I think we kind of had that with Obama. He never really did anything before. I didn't, I'm pretty going to guess that Obama was pretty much the facade, and the people behind him were making most of the decisions.
Well, I think perhaps Obama was the mirror image of Trump, and that Trump is the same way, to where he's a guy, he'll make decisions and he's got ideas, and he definitely. I don't think that he just lets people roll over him. He listens to advice and then says what he wants to do, but then I think he delegates someone else to write out he's working with the lawyers to figure out how to word this executive order, and then they go back and forth on that. And I think Obama was the same way, to where there were things he wanted to do and things people were pushing him to do. And ultimately other people were in charge. He was acting like a typical politician these days, like a legislator who hands it off to the bureaucracy to do the real work. So,
but I posted a thing last night, Biden's Gettysburg Address. I don't know if you saw, Joe Biden gave a presentation yesterday at the Hill in Gettysburg, and where he delivered the speech. That was kind of weird, and the delivery was kind of weird too. And as with many of these events, almost nobody showed up. I think we can say there were negative people that showed up, because there were Trump supporters with the signs and all greeting him as he arrived. So if you take the Biden supporters and subtract the Trump supporters who show up, I think it may have been a negative number.
Yeah.
But it was for YouTube, It was intended for television, but it was intended for modern YouTube. And it was, I mean, it clearly wasn't his speech. You know, he has speechwriters do it. And I included the text, the transcript of the speech, because it's kind of interesting in that it's basically all about Lincoln's. It's very much about Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. It's about him divided. It's about him uniting the country, which I don't believe is going to.
Yeah, he's been
conceivable.
trying to play that card. Yeah.
Right. And weirdly enough, he didn't mention Trump at all in the speech.
Yeah.
That was different.
Well, I know what that's about. Remember he canceled all his negative ads. He's trying to be the bigger man while the president recovers. Now the president's recovered, I fully expect it all to go back on.
Well, that's a good point.
Maybe posts on Twitter that were all that uniter stuff.
So maybe that speech was written while Trump was in the hospital there at Walter Reed, and maybe he just said no, do one without Trump being mentioned.
Yeah, I think that
makes sense.
Biden really did a few interesting things. He's still an old school campaigner, kind of like John McCain in that way when McCain suspended his campaign in 2008 to go try and fix things, right? And Biden does a few gentlemanly Biden things because he's from that school. I know the president wouldn't have given him the same consideration, but Biden does have that thing. So remember when the president's brother died, Biden was all about, nope, no one says anything bad. Stop that. It's not how this works. So he still has that older thing, which is nice to see.
Well, and maybe that's a response to supposedly polls have shown that older voters are tending towards Biden. And I think a lot of that is just longing for the days when candidates could have conversations without lying about each other.
Yep.
If that ever existed,
but at the same time, Biden doesn't seem to, last week Biden didn't seem to be like that.
Yeah, and then certainly
he's got a lot of younger staffers and a lot of younger people who work with the party, and they're not so easily tamed.
No, definitely not. I think this is kind of like there's just sometimes he is in charge, and in the end, even those kids are going to listen to him when he says, I'm going to be very pissed off. I'm going to fire you guys if you don't do what I tell you to do. And so he has that he still has some of that. So
I think you can always hold someone accountable in the sense that it's okay for them to delegate speeches and draft legislation and whatnot, and then they're still responsible for being the one who makes the decision, who approves it. So it still reflects them. To some degree.
And our own Peter Robinson has told us all about the mechanisms involved, and he does that so well.
And that's perfect example of that. And that nobody but Reagan would have approved that speech.
Yeah.
So,
right.
And going back to the puppet thing, I think I don't think that Kamala Harris is the power behind him either. If for whatever reason he had to step aside, I think she would be beholden to the same powers. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I think those powers, although I don't know who I'm in no position to know who they are, but I'll bet they're they're higher ups in the Democratic Party.
Yep. They're much more still machine-driven party than the Republicans are.
Yeah.
They still exert a huge amount of control, and fortunately, in some ways, they're old time cynics. So they got all these kids are coming up who have all these crazy ideas, but the guys who run the party are like, we want to get elected. You can't do these things. Oh, and we like to be rich.
Yeah.
So
to some extent, but I think they're afraid of the people under them, and rightly so. I think they've been fomenting a revolutionary attitude
Yes.
among younger voters, and they've been encouraging people to uh, focus on power and to identify by all these victim groups and whatnot, by all these special interests. So they can't escape it anymore. I think they've created a monster, and
Yep.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because the power and the energy, they tried to run the energy of the youth there. And of course, people who are crazier have more energy, right? And so they got the craziest, and now they found it's kind of uncontrollable.
Yep.
Well,
Witness the riots.
Well, I was going to say, I think it, even before all this riot stuff started, I remember reading, Ann Coulter had a book comparing Democrats to the French revolutionaries and describing the French Revolution.
Yeah.
And, and so I think what's going on now is a kind of a combination of different, there's elements from different revolutions happen throughout the world. But I bet when the French Revolution happened, I'm sure you had a political class who had an interest in getting rid of the king, and they thought that they were going to control what happened after you took down the regime.
Yep.
And so I think you're seeing something kind of like that now, to where the Democrats, I mean, their policies anyway are more about destroying things than they are about building things. And I think they've focused the energy on tearing down all these restrictions to power, so that they can do things like deal with climate change and whatnot. But I think they're in for a surprise if they knock down those restrictions.
Yeah. Once the mob is unleashed, it will keep killing until someone retames it. I mean, I've read, there's a podcast called Revolutions, and I listened to a lot of it, and talks about the French Revolution, and there were the situation where the guy is told in advance that he's on the kill order list, and he's like, "Well, we started this. They can't kill me. I'm this guy. I'm like, you're lying." And the next day they come and arrest him and chop off his head. And he's
As
just
if they had never read any history at all.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just like, but we killed all those guys together. Why am I being like? It just never occurred to him. And nope. And then those guys, and then what happens after they kill that guy? It's called the Thermidor reaction, where all these other guys are like, "Oh my God, they just killed him. They're going to kill us next. We got to get them before they get us." And then then the terror ended.
It's like the wonderful Jordan Peterson answer to somebody who says, "Well, think again, sunshine," which is the best ever.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that one.
I don't think I've seen that one, but yeah.
It's about how revolutions always go bad. It's just, if you've ever read any history.
Yep. There's so
think again, sunshine. It's the best line ever.
Yeah. I remember, was it like having a conversation with another military historian, and he's sort of like talking about, all these communist revolutions worked. And I'm like, really? How many of them actually succeeded? And he related off the 5 of them that succeeded. And I'm like, now tell me all the ones that failed. And then he starts going like, oh, I see your point, because there's like 100 failed revolutions, and there's like 4 that succeeded. There was Vietnam, China, the Soviet Union, and Cuba, and a few of the other ones. But there's a whole bunch of communist revolutions that happened in rebellions that happened all over South America, and they just put them down.
Oh yeah,
there's like drop down, and also in Africa, and in like Rebellions get crushed all the time, but they don't teach you about that in university because all the lefty professors don't want to talk about the failures.
Well, and yeah, so there's kind of a pro-revolutionary attitude that's taught in school these days. I don't know how it compares to what was 30, 40 years ago, but obviously we think the American Revolution turned out pretty well, but even in the case of a revolution for the right reasons, it's still it's just the nature of war that once it begins, you have no idea what's coming out the other end.
Yep. All those guys that started World War I did not understand. They're like I'm reading this book about the Austrian-Hungarians, and they've started this war, and they're like, okay, the commander in the army is like, well, we're doing it for one last go of honor, and then we're going to collapse. Wait, you started a war that you don't think you're going to win, fully knowing that you think it's going to destroy your country, but you think this is better to go out with like than try to fix things.
Yeah,
so, okay, I guess we're running out of energy, as we say around here, and this has been a pretty good show. Do we have something we want to go on a high note on?
Yeah. Revolution's not.
There you go.
So much. High note. Well, president's back. He's campaigning. He's been. The doctors have okayed his campaigning. I think we'll see some rallies soon. I think it'll be good.
Yeah, I was watching Tim Pool last night, and he was showing.
Tim Pool.
He's an interesting study that happened. There's always, we call it the shy Tory syndrome, when the pollsters come up and talk to the people, and they say, "Yeah, I'm going to vote for the other guy," and for like the liberal or the Democrat, but they actually are going to vote Tory, or conservative. And usually that's about 2 to 3% in the polls, and a lot of pollsters even acknowledge it. This study done by these British people found that when they called up and said, "We're from the American Press Organization. We want your answers on the polls." And those people would say, "Yeah, we're voting Democrat." And then a British organization called up the same people and asked them again, saying, "We're from this British Institute. What do you think?" And they're like, "Oh, we're voting for Trump." And they found the number was not the usual 2 to 3% difference. It was 10. When the lefties called them up and asked them, or the news media calling them up, people are deliberately lying to them, either because of the fear, but a lot of people just are lying to them because they think the polls are propaganda and that they want to screw with them.
They are.
I think that's probably one of the greatest problems we have in our generation is just people not speaking up. And they definitely have things to fear, but the only way you get out of that situation is by speaking up. You got to have everybody doing it.
Well, at least on Ricochet, we can all agree that everyone is definitely going to make their opinions felt.
I can't think of. There is one bit of good news that came today. That was my county, Harris County, Houston. The Texas Supreme Court ruled that they cannot send mail-in ballots to every voter just for the heck of it. So there's a little protection against fraud. You're going to get tons of fraud throughout the country anyway.
I don't think you're going to get tons of fraud, but what they have discovered, and this is like from Jimmy Carter's report from the early 2000s, is it just gets spoiled. Like people screw up the ballot so much, you'll lose like in some places up to 30% of the ballots are just are going to be thrown out because people don't know how these things work. And I think some people pointed this out. The Democrats have screwed up. They put so much emphasis on getting their people to do the mail-in balloting, forgetting about this like huge ballot problems. And all the Republicans are going to look at that and say, go vote for real in the polling stations and doing other things. So I think you're going to have these things. Oh, and one other thing, we were talking to Max Ledoux a few weeks ago, and he was telling us about like how some of the college universities sway usual responsible districts that would be more conservatives, and then you got 10,000 lefty students showing up and voting there and changing how the odds in New Hampshire are. A lot of those kids are not in those universities right now. All those university towns are empty because all the kids are doing Zoom classes from their homes, and their homes are usually in those cities. So you might have larger turnout in cities where it's not a swing city. You're going to have that happen, and then you're going to have all these places that are no longer having their college towns swinging them or making them narrow become solidly red.
Interesting. I will say, received my household's ballots in California. Monday it was, I think. So, and it was the correct number of ballots with the right names on them. So far, so good.
Yep.
Didn't get any for your dead grandparents.
No, I didn't. I called them up beforehand, like a week or two ago, just to check to make sure that everybody in the family was registered and it was all good, and that there was no extra people registered in the house. And yeah, it was fine. As a point of note, my wife is going to be working the polls here during the election, and so we'll get some inside. I could do some on-site reporting.
Okay, excellent. Well, I think that's great, and I think we've ended up on a bit more of a positive note than we did earlier.
There you go.
So why don't we end it here and say thanks for coming by, Aaron. I hope you had a good time talking to us. And
yeah, it's fun.
That was a blast, man.
Yeah, and we'll be sure to see you all in the next episode of Land of Confusion.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.